What if, rather than at a therapist's office, a self-help book, or even in the light of day, the most profound healing takes place in the stillness just before you fall asleep, when the barrier between your conscious mind and your soul is at its weakest? The final 30 seconds before you go into unconsciousness are a holy threshold, according to Carl Jung, a magical entrance to the subconscious. Here, in the unguarded space between dreaming and waking, change can start, not with effort or analysis, but with a gentle whisper that goes beyond the head and speaks to the spirit. 7 words: I accept all of myself right now, spoken softly before bed. Beyond their calming effect, these words act as a symbolic key that opens the secret passages of your subconscious, beckoning the rejected aspects of yourself, the wounded child, the silent shadow, and the buried emotion, to come home. Jung realized that the unconscious is more than just a repository for memories. It's a dynamic environment filled with stories and symbols. Rewriting the inner tale you've unconsciously lived by is possible when you communicate with it in its native language: ritual, emotion, repetition. Rather than trying to change yourself, this article explains how saying these 7 words to yourself every night can help mend the broken bond you have with yourself by allowing you to embrace the very qualities you've been told to conceal. Smiling this statement allows you to tap into your shadow self, release internal resistance, and enter the peaceful strength of completeness. In the long run, this seemingly insignificant action can soothe emotional turmoil, ease the inner critic, and reorient your sense of self, away from shame and toward acceptance. You don't have to become someone else. You just have to stop rejecting yourself. In other words, this isn't about positive self-talk or auto-suggestion. Rather, it's a sacred psychological ritual that reflects a deeper truth. The first step toward healing is to stop avoiding ourselves and start listening, even in the dark. One reason: what you say just before you go to bed has an impact. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. Carl Jung once said this. And it is more than just poetry. It is a profound insight into how our inner world impacts our outward world. The still, final moment before we fall asleep is the most potent time for activating this reality. According to Jung, there is a symbolic crossing between aspects of the self that occurs at this brief threshold. When the body relaxes, the breath slows, and the mind starts to release its grip on the waking world. The ego, with all its responsibilities as an employee, spouse, parent, and performer, starts to crumble, and as it does, the door to the unconscious opens. This is a holy moment, not in a religious, but in a profoundly psychological way. Here, your innermost whispers are not lost in space, but rather heard. The subconscious mind picks it up. The symbolic world of long-lost emotions, archetypal forces, and repressed memories. By simply stating, "I am unworthy," your mind will start to rewrite your inner story to reflect that conviction rather than argue it. On the other hand, when you tell your mind, "I am whole," it will reciprocate. It changes, starts to pay more attention, and rearranges itself to follow the new symbolic guidance. According to Jung, the words uttered just before one drifts off to sleep are more than just noises. They are powerful symbols that can be used as psychic instruments. Powerful words awaken archetypes. They transmit energy. They are able to communicate with your nonverbal aspects through imagery, emotion, and dreams. The unconscious is at its most malleable, sensitive, and meaning-hungry at this very moment. Even if the ego is sleeping, the mind is awake. The system processes, resolves, and generates by itself. Dreams do not appear at random, but rather reflect the soul's efforts to heal, integrate, and awaken. What you say to yourself just before bed is more of an invitation than a mandate. All night long, they establish the mood for your introspective labor. Unrest manifests as dreams, weariness, or spiritual heaviness when you nourish the unconscious with feelings of shame, remorse, or self-loathing. But when you give it symbols of forgiveness, acceptance, and peace, it starts a new kind of alchemy, bringing back something that has been hidden from view for a long time. Neuroscience has now verified what Jung noticed many years ago, so this is not wishful thinking. In the hours leading up to sleep, the brain is at its most receptive to suggestions. During this twilight stage, neural connections are developed that have a tendency to retain words said here, which can leave psychological fingerprints. Additionally, according to Jung, words have the power to awaken archetypes, which are innate psychological patterns present in every person. Just saying, "I forgive," can bring the wounded healer to you. To bring darkness into light, all it takes is a "I accept" statement. A whisper of "I am enough" has the power to awaken a latent sense of playfulness that has been repressed for far too long, inviting long-lost aspects of one's identity to return home. They are more than simply affirmations. They are rituals of reconnection. But these days, many of us view going to bed as a superficial ritual, nothing more than a last check of our phones and a light switch. However, Jung would strongly suggest viewing it in a different light, as a gateway, an opportunity to show respect, and a chance to plant symbolic seeds in the rich soil of our unconscious. Reason being, the internal monologue of tonight sets the tone for tomorrow's emotional terrain. Consider this. What if the last things you said to yourself before bed were deliberate? What if, instead of reflecting your scars, they mirrored your completeness? This section's 7 words, "I accept all of myself right now," are not chosen at random, but rather according to Jungian principles. They all go deep into your subconscious in their own unique ways, reawakening long-lost aspects of your identity. This isn't just theory. Jung experienced it himself in his patience, in his dreams, and in the subtle shift that starts with a sincere word spoken in the stillness of night when the spirit listens. And hence, tonight, you must not allow your final thoughts to linger. Feel the effects of anxiety or amnesia. Communicate with purpose. Talk with utmost respect. Express yourself in a manner that beckons your spirit to return. Second, if 7 words could alter the course of history, what would they be? There was never a script of 7 enchanted words that Carl Jung gave us. He refrained from providing simplistic affirmations or techniques for going to sleep. However, he provided us with a framework via the breadth and depth of his works on topics, such as the unconscious, archetypes, the shadow, and the individuation process. Within that context, we may extract a profound statement that resonates with his psychology. "I accept all of myself right now." These are 7 humble words that contain a philosophy packed into each syllable. This is more of a ritual than a sentence. It's a symbolic act of merging your conscious and unconscious selves. We might approach it in a Jungian manner, word by word, with each word serving as a gateway. I. Here we find the foundation, the seat of consciousness. According to Jungian theory, the I encompasses more than simply the ego. It is also the responsible spark of present. This is when the self-aware individual finally states, "This is mine." There is no longer any need to project or assign blame. Instead, there is complete sovereignty. Saying "I" at the outset is like saying, "This is my work, my pain, my healing." When the unconscious senses that the message is about them, it listens differently. Give in. According to Jung, acceptance is the key that unlocks the door to change, not weakness or indulgence. When you say "accept" before sleep, it's as if you're whispering to the shadow, "I see you. I no longer deny you." When you accept, you don't condone. You see clearly, staring at our wounds, our darkness, our unmet needs, and saying, "I will not turn away." All. Possibly the most radical term used in the whole statement. None of it, not even the charming components or the portions that shine when the sun is shining. Wholeness, according to Jung, cannot be achieved via selective healing, but rather via the union of polarities, such as the sacred and the profane, the upright and the fallen, the light and the shadow. Saying all stops you from editing your soul and starts you from collecting it. A mere word, yet mighty in impact, alludes to ownership. All of the things, fears, dreams, sadness, instincts that reside in your psychic field are uniquely yours. According to Jung, we become less unaware of our inner drives the more we accept responsibility for them. All eliminates projection. And as Jung said, projection is the source of the majority of human misery. I alone. This is the key that unlocks the entrance to your whole self, not simply your ego. According to Jung, the self is the archetypal totality, the place within where you might find meaning and who observes your life as it happens. Speaking to myself is like tapping into a mythic core, an inner healer, a silent witness, or the soul. You have to go beyond your identity to do it. I see. Time itself is bent by this word. Ego dwells in the here and now, unconscious in the timeless. The word right builds a bridge. Healing and worthiness are not put off until tomorrow. They are summoned forth in this very breath. It proclaims the instant the mind reacts to immediate rather than delayed stimuli. Finally, the last word, the seal, completes the invocation and breaks the waiting cycle. Truth uttered now has a greater impact on the unconscious than future goals or nebulous promises. This is more than a passing moment. It is the portal through which the spirit can hear, the starting point for the process of healing. This is the part where a sentence becomes a ritual. Said 7 times, I accept all of myself right now, is more than just a recitation. It is a holy act of integration. From its banishment, you are summoning the shadow to return home. You are giving voice to long silent archetypes. In the liminal symbolic area, just before sleep, when the conscious mind fades and the deeper self starts to listen, you're asking the psyche to transform by linking the ego with the unconscious. Rather than trying to control your unconscious, you should treat it with respect. You're forming an alliance with healing, not pleading for it. For Jung, this is the defining feature of genuine psychological change as opposed to superficial affirmations. Truth uttered with presence and reverence could initiate the return to self, the return to wholeness, and the return to peace. Though Jung never thought words alone could rescue the soul. Underneath the moon, the third shadow integration starts. The unconscious, according to Carl Jung, is like a huge inner kingdom, full of power and mystery, yet completely hidden from view from the conscious mind. This realm revolves around the shadow, which consists of the aspects of ourselves that we have rejected, denied, or deemed undesirable. These are more than just imperfections. They are banished realities, silenced opinions, and holy pieces of our identity that long to be reunited. Jung believed that facing one's shadow was fundamental, not optional. In fact, there are few times that are more inviting of that encounter than the minutes just before bedtime. During this time, the soul is at its most open, the mind is at its most malleable, and the ego is at its weakest. Preceding your nighttime slumber with the words, I accept all of myself right now, is more than just a passive affirmation. It's a gesture of connection with your shadow self. I refuse to act like I'm only the portions that get acclaim when it's daytime. This is a display of presence, not force. Instead of starting with self-control, humility, acknowledgement, and invitation are the building blocks of shadow integration. Also, genuineness elicits a response from the unconscious, not demand. Rather of vanishing, our minds undergo a metamorphosis while we sleep. Ego relaxes, unconscious mind awakens. It deals with feelings, settles internal conflicts, and starts what Jung termed the sacred process of individuation, the path to becoming a fully realized human being. A change occurs inside you when the last words you murmur before falling asleep signify acceptance. There is no longer an internal conflict, and your unconscious mind has received the message. Staying hidden is no longer an option if you have experienced rejection. Let go of the fury, anguish, and forgotten dreams. Dreams are a common way for them to make their debut. According to Jung, dreams are not meaningless occurrences, but rather messages from the soul. He referred to them as an intuitive, unplanned self-portrait in symbolic form. Your dreams may reflect the internal disarray if you oppose or delay going to sleep at night. They may become disorganized, aggressive, or both. Your dreams will start to show more coherence if you go into sleep with a mindful acceptance. Symbols like a closed room, a child lost in a crowd, or a shadowy person lurking on the periphery of your consciousness may keep popping up. These are more than just dreams. They represent portions of your mind that are actively seeking reconnection, and reconnection is the first step toward healing. To integrate is not to purge oneself of negativity or to eradicate one's shadow. Avoid moralistic purity, Jung cautioned. The shadow, he understood, holds more than just darkness. It also holds the gold, the wants, talents, and passions that we repressed in order to stay alive. The mediator who repressed their rage may discover a renewed commitment to honesty and personal space as a result. The emotionally fragile person who repressed their feelings may unearth latent capacities for empathy and emotional intelligence. This is mental alchemy, not bettering oneself, but remembering oneself, not changing one's identity, but returning to one's true self. As soon as the world becomes silent, this hallowed procedure can commence. The defenses of the ego start to crumble just before one goes to sleep. When we rationalize, deny, or suppress, we take a step back. In that state of receptivity, the unconscious mind is more pliable. It starts to listen with curiosity and rearranges itself according to the information it gets. Said quietly and honestly, those 7 words convey more than just an idea. They announce the end of the battle and the safe return home. You could have very real dreams one night and completely non-existent dreams the next. However, the work is being done unconsciously, without any effort. With each iteration, this practice tends to the spiritual soil. With every murmur, a pathway is forged between the ego and the self, between the waking and dreaming states of consciousness, and between isolation and belonging. Gradually, you'll notice a difference. Your dreams will get more lucid, your day-to-day reactions will become less extreme, and your inner critic will become less harsh. Patterns emerge, and a sense of completeness washes over you. You start to wake up differently, not with pyrotechnics, but with presence, not with perfection, but with peace, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the horizon softening before morning. You are maturing into an authentic, complete being. Lastly, we are already living out a story, a myth, written not by reason or purpose, but by the unconscious, according to Carl Jung. This story is written long before we consciously select our life. Symbolic truth, an internal framework of meaning. This tale is not fictitious in the sense that contemporary minds understand a myth. How do we relate to love, suffering, achievement, and even the passage of time? What factors influence our self-perception and sense of worth? Because most people mistake the script's recurrence for fate, they never read it. But in reality, what they're experiencing is programming, a combination of unconscious archetypes, repressed anxieties, forgotten memories, and unhealed scars. Not as a warning, but as an invitation, this is the unseen storyline that Jung foretold, because it is possible to rewrite this myth, despite its deep roots. Certainly not by coercion, reason, or empty promises. Instead of obeying commands, the unconscious mind responds to symbols, genuine expressions of emotion, and ritualized, repeated motions that communicate with it in its own language. The 7 words, "I accept all of myself right now," become a powerful, yet kind statement that reclaims authorship from guilt and returns it to completeness when stated before sleep. Interrupts the old story in this way. Saying these words even once puts a little dent in the myth you've been living by. Kind words are doing more than that. They're a structural alteration to your mind. Your subconscious starts to pay attention to your authenticity rather than your aspirations or objectives. Your symbolic reality is gradually being restructured. Speaking softly to oneself in the light of day might be a pleasant surprise. Stopping yourself from being too hard on yourself is possible. You could find that your inner critic, the one who used to be so hard on yourself and demand perfection, starts to back off. A change in your dream pattern is possible. Your once abandoned parent may now be the one to welcome you home. An animal in danger can halt its pursuit and start talking. Even a locked door might be pried open. This is more than simply a dream. It's a soul message that your inner story is changing, that old wounds are healing, and that you are finally friends with yourself again. The unconscious mind starts to reorganize your emotional behaviors after it hears that message night after night in a consistent manner. Anxieties from the past vanish, responsiveness decreases, and a profound calmness appears. Your mindset has shifted from, "I must hide who I am," to "I am allowed to be whole." This change may not be noticeable to others right away, but it is fundamental. It is the subtle turning moment that molds all subsequent choices, limits, acts of creation, closeness, and bravery. According to Jung, self-standing, rather than punishment or humiliation, is the path to genuine development. You reassert your inner power the second you quit trying to escape your story and start listening, without passing judgment, but with empathy. These 7 words are important because of that. Words like symbol, timing, sincerity, and repetition communicate with the unconscious in its own language. They are not motivational fluff. It is not necessary to uncover every wound from your childhood in order to start healing. In order to find healing, you do not need to decipher every traumatic experience. I only require you to, particularly in crucial moments like the last breath before sleep, when the unconscious mind is most receptive, you need to learn to relate to yourself differently. When you mutter, "I accept all of myself right now," your mind gets the signal. You're safe. The battle is finished. I can now defend myself without your help. This is the first step in rewriting the myth. Embracing rather than ignoring the painful memories. Welcoming rather than shunning the shadow, and so on. Your inner story evolves subtly, symbolically, and honestly with each repetition. Now that you're an adult, you recall the truth. You were entire from the beginning. You're not the injured child reliving the past. You're just now starting to realize it. As you slumber, the 5th emotional alchemy takes place. Carl Jung saw the human mind not as a broken machine, but as a holy crucible, a place where the most primal aspects of our emotional lives may be transformed into wisdom, power, and completeness. Not in the physical sense of metal and fire, but in the symbolic sense, a realm where depression turns into insight, fury into understanding, and shadows into light. Instead than trying to erase it, embrace it. Jung held the view that our shadow selves, our emotional suffering that had not yet been processed, and our scars were not hindrances to our development, but rather the essential ingredients for change. His term for this process was psychic alchemy, and he said that presence, rather than performance or perfection, was the key. Rather of starting in a therapy session or writing in a notebook, many find that the process starts in the darkest hours of the night, when they murmur to themselves, "I accept all of myself right now." You aren't just calming yourself down before bed. You're starting a process, an initiation inside your unconscious mind, something subtle but deep. More than just affirmation. That one remark lights a metaphorical fire in the subconscious. Feelings of rage, fear, sadness, and unfulfilled wants are brought to the surface, illuminating previously hidden aspects of your being. Like psychic lead, they weigh heavily on the spirit. In contrast, Jung shared the view of ancient alchemists who saw lead as a resource rather than a trash can. Lead is a material that can be transformed if approached with compassion rather than judgment. It is loaded with possibility. Rest is the hallowed vessel. We put on masks, get distracted, and let our egos rule our lives during the day. At night, though, it takes off its armor, lets its unconscious mind come out, and starts utilizing whatever you've given it. You will experience emotional exhaustion, subtle anxiety, and restless nightmares if you go to bed with negative emotions like anger, avoidance, or self-hatred. However, a shift occurs in the chemical dynamics when the offering is accepted. As we become more self-aware, our fears start to subside. Our anger shows its origins in a need for safety, and our shame gives way to compassion. Emotional alchemy is what this is. Instead of exploding like a volcano, it changes shape, heals itself from the inside out, and speaks softly. Even if you don't get heavenly visions or crystal clear thinking when you wake up, but a small change could be apparent to you. Your emotions seem more secure, your responses take longer, and your inner monologue becomes more kind. An internal tempest subsides. This transformation is the result of deliberate ritual presence, rather than an accident. Symbol, honesty, and repetition are more effective than willpower in shifting the unconscious. An internal peace contract, these 7 words become an offering every night. Emotions, according to Jung, are not static characteristics, but rather dynamic patterns of energy. They change, adapt, and, yes, undergo metamorphosis. You're not trying to stifle the shadow side when you practice self-acceptance before bed. Rather, you're creating a safe space for it to emerge. Telling your unconscious mind that you can stop worrying about harming yourself is a big deal. This is the place where genuine recovery starts. Not with coercion, but with acceptance. Not with solutions, but with transparency. Willingness is paramount. What you oppose, according to Jung, will not only remain but will become even more powerful. Giving up control is the key to finding peace. Being brave is embracing your feelings and having faith in your mind's ability to process the emotions you've repressed for so long. There is no magic in those 7 words. Rather, they serve as a portal through which the spirit can regain its breath. When you say them, you lower the barrier between yourself and your feelings. By making room for yourself, you allow your inner healer to come forth. You can transform any emotion. All you have to do is stop rejecting it. Such is the effect of these words. The alchemical vessel is warmed by their soft flame. They provide your mind a sacred invitation to change, saying, "You are safe now, you are heard," and in that sacred invitation, healing starts. 6th, the significance of night rituals for Jung's clients. Carl Jung spent decades as a clinician, seeing patients from many walks of life, including artists, soldiers, scientists, mothers, academics, and seekers, proving that he was more than just a philosopher of the mind. For those seeking more than just analysis, his consulting room in Küsnacht, Switzerland, became a haven for people whose troubles went unacknowledged. For many, the first step towards self-transformation was not analysis or reasoning, but rather ritual, the performance of subtle symbolic acts that reached not the rational but the subconscious. For his time, Jung had a revolutionary insight. The unconscious mind is unresponsive to reasoning and persuasion, but receptive to symbolic sincerity. As one's ego begins to droop and their unconscious mind begins to stir, he saw the minutes just before sleep as a threshold of tremendous psychological potency. The soul is most receptive when a sacred liminal zone opens like a window. This is where the power of genuine, well-chosen words lies, ready to transform the inner realm. Take Jung's patient, a prosperous guy in his 40s, as an example. Successful on the outside, he was drowning on the inside from worry and reoccurring visions of suffocation. Carl Jung saw what the man was too busy to notice. He had become ensnared in his character, that social mask that was flawlessly polished for survival, but devoid of emotion. His true, more sensitive, scared, and living personality had been banished. Jung did not provide an explanation, but rather a pre-sleep routine. "I allow myself to feel what is inside me." The man initially sneered at the idea, thinking it was silly and pointless. Then he had to say 7 things while placing his hand on his chest. His dreams started to change as he continued to follow the practice night after night. The drowning ceased. The water gave rise to new life. Freely breathing, he fantasized about rising to the surface. After a long period of emotional inactivity, he started to cry again. Integration, not chance, was at work here. After receiving an invitation, the unconscious mind returned the favor. The patient had now transformed into a woman afflicted with terror dreams of being pursued. She commanded respect and admiration when she was awake. However, in her dream world, an unruly, terrified, silent figure trailed behind her. Jung assisted her in recognizing, via conversation, the long-repressed aspect of herself that experienced feelings of vulnerability, fragility, and being overwhelmed. He suggested she say softly to herself before bed, "I accept the part of me that is afraid." Despite her resistance, she began to have different dreams as time went on. The shadow stopped chasing after her and started weeping, talking, and hugging her instead. The monster wasn't an adversary, but rather an abandoned aspect of herself that needed acceptance. The symbolic force of nocturnal ritual is reconciliation, not magic or persuasion. When you stop pushing anything inside, it will cease trying to get your attention. Integrating the disowned, the shadowy, and the hushed into conscious relationship. Jung's view is the way to heal, not by forcefully extracting them. For Jung, ritual, not religious ritual, but purposeful deeds that convey a psychological truth, was a holy instrument in this job. Such deeds thrive in the hour leading up to sleep, when the ego gives up. Jung saw sacred symbolic offerings, what we now call mantras or affirmations, as a way to communicate with long-suppressed aspects of one's identity, rather than to alter reality. Another case in point, a teen guy whose nightmares are terrors that he can't escape. His father had instilled in him a sense of guilt for being emotionally vulnerable, which contributed to his anxiety. Jung only gave the youngster one piece of advice: "I'm allowed to be soft despite the boy's laughter." The fear subsided 3 weeks later. A new myth has entered the unconscious. Being yourself is no longer a must. A fundamental thread runs across all of these stories. The internal struggle between the aspects of ourselves that we embrace and those that we reject is the true source of our misery, not external circumstances. These people weren't doing magic when they spoke new symbolic truths before bed. They were bringing about calm. They were sending a message to the mind that read, "You are welcome here." The 7 words, "I accept all of myself right now," have profound psychological force, not because of their popularity or cleverness, but because of their truth. Oh, show some respect for a Jungian ideal that is as old as mythology. When the period of exile ends and the exiled are restored to full health, healing can commence. Even though they may not seem important, these rites serve a purpose. They are seismic, according to the unconscious language. As with the natural world, the unconscious mind reacts to declarations of preparedness. Step 7. Make it a nightly habit to repeat the 7 words. So far, we have traversed symbolic terrain, learning about the sacredness of the hour just before sleep, Jung's notion of the unconscious as a mythic world in and of itself, and the power of sincere language to connect the awareness and the shadow. However, as Jung pointed out, understanding is insufficient in and of itself. Acquiring knowledge is insufficient. Action is required. Believing isn't enough. Action is what's required. Even the most profound truths become mere abstractions in the absence of embodiment. Ritual, a devotional act repeated not for result but for connection, is what counts. Is there a specific way to incorporate the sacred statement, "I accept all of myself right now," into your nightly practice? The first step is to decide to create room for oneself, rather than to perform or impress. Not merely to put the body to sleep, but to rouse the psyche to present. Get some peace and quiet first, just a couple of minutes before you turn in for the night. Silence will engulf you after you turn off the electronic sounds and lower the lights. You're crossing a threshold in your mind, not merely drifting off to sleep. At Jung's view, the unconscious is best revealed at moments of silence, when all external stimuli have been removed. The stillness, the lack of sound, and the lowering of breathing rate all provide an ideal environment for the development of symbolic content. The second step is to talk calmly and honestly. "I accept all of myself right now." Say the 7 words slowly and deliberately, without rushing or repeating them like an incantation, but with your full present. As a stone dropped into calm water, let each word fall. When you hear a word that seems catchy like accept myself, pause. Embrace the challenge, persevere, rather than an adversary. That is the shadow posing as an invitation. Third, if desired, make the ritual unique to you. Although these same statements would be confirmed by Jung as powerful, he was also aware that ritual had to seem genuine to the inner landscape. Feel free to tweak your wording a little. I let myself feel everything tonight. I forgive the parts one once feared. Or, I welcome home what I rejected. The important thing is not to be perfectly poetry, but to be fully sincere emotionally. These are not meaningless affirmations. Rather, they are symbolic messages to your unconscious that you can come out of hiding from me. Fourth, make an outside somatic gesture. Jung had a keen awareness of the soma's function as a reflection of the soul and the body's place in psychological existence. One way to ground the ritual in the body is to place a hand on the heart, a palm on the belly, or to lie down with intention. Your body will start to link this position with feelings of security, easiness, and release as time goes on. A person's breathing, rhythm, and gestures are all ways in which the unconscious mind might pick up on spoken language. Fifth, write down your dreams. Dreams, according to Jung, are the most sacred pathway to the unconscious. If you say these words to yourself before bed, your dreams will be more symbolic, emotionally complex, and vivid than usual. If you wake up with a specific image, symbol, or tone in your head, jot it down. Take your time and gather information before interpreting. There could be archetypal symbols, repeating locations, forgotten people, or patterns. You can see these as signs from your developing psychic story. They're messages. And if you're really moved, you can use the Jungian dream prompts to figure out what aspect of yourself your dream is depicting. Can you tell me what this picture wants me to think or feel? What if instead of fighting this figure, I welcomed it? Step 6. Have faith in the gradualness. There is no easy solution. The psyche, according to Jung, develops in spirals rather than linear progressions. Because it has to be genuine, transformation takes time. Even if you don't feel anything after the first night, a subtle trust will develop over the course of several weeks or months. The injured portions of you, the emotions that have been abandoned, and the instincts that have been forgotten start to surface, not all at once and not always softly, but gradually, since they now feel they will be embraced with kindness instead of banished. Step 7. Persevere despite setbacks. On some evenings, you may sense reluctance, exhaustion, or a lack of conviction in the words. Those are the moments when the ritual is most important, since being there is the most powerful thing to do, even when you don't want to be. Simply stating, when it's hard, communicates to the unconscious mind, I am no longer ruled by avoidance. I can sit with myself even here. This is what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites, the sacred capacity to remain standing between light and dark, hope and doubt, joy and grief, without giving in or running away. Incorporating these 7 words into your nightly routine takes strength and integration to a whole new level. As you light them each night, they become a gateway, a link between your broken and complete selves, a subtle revolution, and a whisper to your spirit that says, you are loved, you are heard, and you are welcome here. Living a whole life is the 8th principle, the reverberation of an evening custom. The ultimate aim of psychotherapy, as Carl Jung has pointed out, is not contentment, success, or stability, but completeness. When one's light and shadow sides, ego and soul, conscious and unconscious, are no longer at conflict but rather recognized, accepted, and progressively blended, he says that person is entire. The goal is not perfection so much as the elimination of the necessity to divide oneself in order to stay alive. This is the peaceful resolution of an internal conflict, a coming together. Saying, I accept all of myself right now, just before sleep, is a spiritual practice that does more than calm your nerves and affect your dreams. You are sowing the seed of the unconscious mind, and as Jung understood, what we sincerely give to the unconscious does not fade away. Rather, it grows slowly and covertly. It becomes ingrained in your very being. This, rather than taking on additional responsibilities or identities, is the core of individuation. The process of revealing one's true self by dissolving illusions and removing masks. The emerging self is quiet. It does not arrive by sudden insight or acclaim. Acts of presence, no matter how tiny, consistently bring it. A hesitancy to respond, a suppleness where there was hardness before, will start to show. An old critical voice from within you speaks up, but this time you choose to ignore it. You can't escape the melancholy anymore. You allow happiness to settle in. These changes aren't coincidental. Rather, they indicate that your spirit is starting to trust you again and that aspects of yourself that you rejected are making a triumphant return. Your external existence is also influenced by the changes occurring within you. When you stop invalidating yourself, you stop chasing approval, and it changes your relationships. You have stopped deceiving yourself emotionally, and as a result, you attract truthfulness. By standing firm on your own truth, you create room for others to do the same. Because you've already remembered, there's no need for you to demonstrate your value. This is the inevitable progression of self-awareness, not a miracle. Whatever we push out of our minds manifests as external experiences like fate, struggle, or repetition. This is something that Jung fully grasped. But reclaiming one's fate turns it into liberation. You quit responding mindlessly to life and start actively participating in it, approaching it not from a place of disarray, but of harmony, and from a place of courage rather than terror. In this way, the 7-word ritual exerts its subtle intensity. Its allure lies in the fact that it alters your morning routine in addition to the services it provides while you slept. No longer dispersed among your long-lost selves, you stand firmly planted. You no longer feel divided, which brings you a sense of alignment. Not that life is flawless, but just that. Embrace the day with a serene sense of clarity. Within that clarity, you find strength. With that power comes empathy, and with empathy comes a life you can finally embrace. Even as the sun goes down, this is the reverberation of ceremony. Decisions, limits, presence, and love are where it starts to live. When your heart finally feels secure inside itself, you respond to other people not out of pain, but out of abundance, a true gift. You start acting out the words, rather than merely reciting them. You start to exemplify completeness. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That journey doesn't start with a loud metamorphosis. It starts with a whisper, a quiet moment, a soft sentence before sleep, a desire to face oneself with reality, as Carl Jung once mentioned. I accept myself completely at this very now. Say it tonight, not for the result, but as an offering. The mind is attuned, and the spirit recalls the familiar sound of the house. Please share your thoughts in the comments section if you were moved by this message, or if even a single word resonated with your personal experience. Is a sacred road back to oneself still a journey you're on? Or have you met that soul whose presence feels like home? Even if it's unfinished, your narrative has the potential to be someone else's guiding light, the sign they were seeking but didn't realize they had. Share this video with someone you care about if they are quietly battling the delusion that love must pain, that self-abandonment is the cost of connection, or that they are undeserving of peace. Please help me to reach out to individuals who are struggling to grasp the idea that true love does not require us to shrink. There is no higher calling than the union with one's own inner truth, and genuine connection does not need giving up one's soul. Just one last thing before you go. Subscribe and turn on the bell. Within these walls, we delve into the depths of the human mind, uncovering its latent structure, the unconscious's murmurs, and the ways in which each relationship mirrors our own personal growth. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, themes, or wounds you would like us to address in upcoming videos. Because of you, this place has life. Here, your opinion is not only valued, but very necessary. Not only did you show up to this video, but you also showed up to the sacred labor of remembering your true self, to your inner job. Rest certain, your soul will know, not through dread, but through peace when the perfect person comes along. Up until then, though, Allow the bond you build with yourself remain your closest companion. All things true originate from that place of completeness, which is both the base and the house.